Chapter 23. Susan sat alone in the plush surroundings of Node 3. She nursed a lemon mist herb tea and awaited the return of her tracer. As senior cryptographer, Susan enjoyed the terminal with the best view. It was on the backside of the ring of computers and faced the crypto floor. From this spot, Susan could oversee all of Node 3. She could also see on the other side of the one-way glass translator standing dead center of the crypto floor. Susan checked the clock. She had been waiting almost an hour. American Remailers Anonymous was apparently taking their time forwarding North Dakota's mail. She sighed heavily. Despite her efforts to forget her morning conversation with David, the words played over and over in her head. She knew she'd been hard on him. She prayed he was okay in Spain. Her thoughts were jarred by the loud hiss of the glass doors. She looked up and groaned. Cryptographer Greg Hale stood in the opening. Greg Hale was tall and muscular with thick blonde hair and a deep cleft chin. He was loud, thick-fleshed, and perpetually overdressed. His fellow cryptographers had nicknamed him Halite, after the mineral. Hale had always assumed it referred to some rare gem, paralleling his unrivaled intellect and rock-hard physique. Had his ego permitted him to consult an encyclopedia, he would have discovered it was nothing more than the salty residue left behind when oceans dried up. Like all NSA cryptographers, Hale made a solid salary. However, he had a hard time keeping that fact to himself. He drove a White Lotus with a moonroof and a deafening subwoofer system. He was a gadget junkie and his car was his showpiece. He'd installed a global positioning computer system, voice-activated door locks, a 5-point radar jammer, and a cellular fax/phone so he'd never be out of touch with his message services. His vanity plate read Megabyte and was framed in violet neon. Greg Hale had been rescued from a childhood of petty crime by the U.S. Marine Corps. It was there that he learned about computers. He was one of the best programmers the Marines had ever seen, well on his way to a distinguished military career. But 2 days before the completion of his third tour of duty, his future suddenly changed. Hale accidentally killed a fellow Marine in a drunken brawl. The Korean art of self-defense, Taekwondo, proved more deadly than defensive. He was promptly relieved of his duty. After serving a brief prison term, Halite began looking for work in the private sector as a programmer. He was always upfront about the incident in the Marines, and he courted prospective employers by offering a month's work without pay to prove his worth. He had no shortage of takers, and once they found out what he could do with the computer, they never wanted to let him go. As his computer expertise grew, Hale began making internet connections all over the world. He was one of the new breed of cyber freaks with email friends in every nation, moving in and out of CD electronic bulletin boards and European chat groups. He had been fired by 2 different employers for using their business accounts to upload pornographic photos to some of his friends. "What are you doing here?" Hale demanded, stopping in the doorway and staring at Susan. He'd obviously expected to have Node 3 to himself today. Susan forced herself to stay cool. "It's Saturday, Greg. I could ask you the same question." But Susan knew what Hale was doing there. He was the consummate computer addict. Despite the Saturday rule, he He often slipped into crypto on weekends to use the NSA's unrivaled computing power to run new programs he was working on. Just wanted to retweak a few lines and check my email, Hale said. He eyed her curiously. What was it you said you're doing here? I didn't, Susan replied. Hale arched a surprised eyebrow. No reason to be coy. We have no secrets here in Node 3, remember? All for one and one for all. Susan sipped her lemon mist and ignored him. Hale shrugged and strode toward the Node 3 pantry. The pantry was always his first stop. As Hale crossed the room, he sighed heavily and made a point of ogling Susan's legs stretched out beneath her terminal. Susan, without looking up, retracted her legs and kept working. Hale smirked. Susan had gotten used to Hale hitting on her. His favorite line was something about interfacing to check the compatibility of their hardware. It turned Susan's stomach. She was proud to complain to Strathmore about Hale. It was far easier just to ignore him. Side note, she was proud to complain to Strathmore about Hale. It was far easier just to... Anyway. Hale approached the Node 3 pantry and pulled open the lattice doors like a bull. He slid a Tupperware container of tofu out of the fridge and popped a few pieces of the gelatinous white substance in his mouth. Then he leaned on the stove and smoothed his gray Belvian slacks and well-starched shirt. You gonna be here long? All night, Susan said flatly. Hale cooed with his mouth full. A cozy Saturday in the playpen, just the two of us. Just the three of us, Susan interjected. Commander Strathmore's upstairs. You might want to disappear before he sees you. Hale shrugged. He doesn't seem to mind you here. He must really enjoy your company. Susan forced herself to keep silent. Hale chuckled to himself and put away his tofu. Then he grabbed a quart of virgin olive oil and took a few swigs. He was a health fiend and claimed olive oil cleaned out his lower intestine. When he wasn't pushing carrot juice on the rest of the staff, he was preaching the virtues of high colonics. Hale replaced the olive oil and went down his computer directly opposite Susan. I think it should read down to his computer directly opposite Susan. Even across the wide ring of terminals, Susan could smell his cologne. She crinkled her nose. Nice cologne. Greg used the entire bottle. Hale flicked on his terminal. Only for you, dear. As he sat there waiting for his terminal to warm up, Susan had a sudden unsettling thought. What if Hale accessed Translator's run monitor? There was no logical reason why he would, but nonetheless, Susan knew he would never fall for some half-baked story about a diagnostic that stumped Translator for 16 hours. Hale would demand to know the truth. The truth was something Susan had no intention of telling him. She did not trust Greg Hale. He was not NSA material. Susan had been against hiring him in the first place, but the NSA had no choice. Hale had been the product of damage control, the skipjack fiasco. 4 years ago, in an effort to create a single public key encryption standard, Congress charged the nation's best mathematicians, those at the NSA, to write a new super algorithm. The plan was for Congress to pass legislation that made the new algorithm the nation's standard, thus alleviating the incompatibilities now suffered by corporations that used different algorithms. Of course, asking the NSA to lend a hand in improving public key encryption was somewhat akin to asking a condemned man to build his own coffin. Translator had not yet been conceived, and an encryption standard would only help to proliferate the use of code writing and make the NSA's already difficult job that much harder. The EFF understood this conflict of interest and lobbied vehemently that the NSA might create an algorithm of poor quality, something it could break. To appease these fears, Congress announced that when the NSA's algorithm was finished, the formula would be published for examination by the world's mathematicians to ensure its quality. Reluctantly, the NSA's crypto team, led by Commander Strathmore, created an algorithm they christened Skipjack. Skipjack was presented to Congress for their approval. Mathematicians from all over the world tested Skipjack and were unanimously impressed. They reported that it was a strong, untainted algorithm and would make a superb encryption standard. But 3 days before Congress was to vote their certain approval of Skipjack, a young programmer from Bell Laboratories, Greg Hale, shocked the world by announcing he'd found a backdoor hidden in the algorithm. The backdoor consisted of a few lines of cunning programming that Commander Strathmore had inserted into the algorithm. It had been added in so shrewd a way that nobody except Greg Hale had seen it. Strathmore's covert addition, in effect, meant that any code written by Skipjack could be decrypted via a secret password known only to the NSA. Strathmore had come within inches of turning the nation's proposed encryption standard into the biggest intelligence coup the NSA had ever seen. The NSA would have held the master key to every code written in America. The computer-savvy public was outraged. The EFF descended on the scandal like vultures, ripping Congress to shreds for their naivety and proclaiming the NSA the biggest threat to the free world since Hitler. The encryption standard was dead. It had come as little surprise when the NSA hired Greg Hale 2 days later. Strathmore felt it was better to have him on the inside working for the NSA than on the outside working against it. Strathmore faced the Skipjack scandal head-on. He defended his actions vehemently to Congress. He argued that the public's craving for privacy would come back to haunt them. He insisted the public needed someone to watch over them. The public needed the NSA to break codes in order to keep the peace. Groups like the EFF felt differently, and they'd been fighting ever since. Chapter 24. David Becker stood in a phone booth across the street from La Clínica de Salud Pública. He'd just been ejected for harassing patient number 104, Mr. Clouchard. Things were suddenly more complicated than he'd anticipated. His little favor to Strathmore, picking up some personal belongings, had turned into a scavenger hunt for some bizarre ring. He'd just called Strathmore and told him about the German tourist. The news had not been received well. After demanding the specifics, Strathmore had fallen silent for a long time. "David," he had finally said very gravely, "finding that ring is a matter of national security. I'm leaving it in your hands. Don't fail me." The phone had gone dead. David stood in the phone booth inside. He picked up the tattered Guia Telefonica and began scanning the yellow pages. "Here goes nothing," he muttered to himself. There were only 3 listings for escort services in the directory, and he didn't have much to go on. All he knew was that the German state had red hair, which conveniently was rare in Spain. The delirious Clouchard had recalled the escort's name as Dewdrop. Becker cringed. Dewdrop? It sounded more like a cow than a beautiful girl. Not a good Catholic name at all. Clouchard must have been mistaken. Becker dialed the first number. "Servicio Social de Sevilla," a pleasant female voice answered. Becker affected his Spanish with a thick German accent. "Hola, hablas alemán?" "No, but I speak English," came the reply. Becker continued in broken English. "Thank you. I wondering if you to help me." "How can we be of service?" The woman spoke slowly in an effort to aid her potential client. "Perhaps you would like an escort?" "Yes, please. Today my brother, Klaus, he has girl, very beautiful, red hair. I want same for tomorrow, please." "Your brother Klaus comes here." The voice was suddenly effervescent, like they were old friends. "Yes, he very fat. You remember him, no?" "He was here today, you say?" Becker could hear her checking the books. There would be no Klaus listed, but Becker figured clients seldom used their real names. I'm sorry," she apologized. "I don't see him here. What was the girl's name your brother was with?" "Had red hair," Becker said, avoiding the question. "Red hair?" she repeated. There was a pause. "This is Servicio Social de Sevilla. Are you sure your brother comes here?" "Sure, yes." "Senor, we have no redheads. We have only pure Andalusian beauties." "Red hair," Becker repeated, feeling stupid. "I'm sorry, we have no redheads at all, but if you... Name is Dewdrop," Becker blurted, feeling even stupider. The ridiculous name apparently meant nothing to the woman. She apologized, suggested Becker was confusing her with another agency, and politely hung up. Strike 1. Becker frowned and dialed the next number. It connected immediately. "Buenas noches, mujeres de España. May I help you?" Becker launched into his same spiel, a German tourist who was willing to pay top dollar for the red-haired girl who was out with his brother today. This time the response was in polite German, but again, no redheads. "I'm sorry," the woman hung up. Strike 2. Becker looked down at the phone book. There was only one number left. The end of the rope already. He dialed. "Escortes Belen?" A man answered in a very slick tone. Again, Becker told his story. Si, senor. My name is Senor Roldan. I would be pleased to help. We have 2 redheads, lovely girls." Becker's heart leapt. "Very beautiful," he repeated in his German accent. "Red hair?" "Yes. What is your brother's name? I will tell you who is his escort today, and we can send her to you tomorrow." "Klaus Schmidt." Becker blurted a name recalled from an old textbook. A long pause. "Well, sir, I don't see a Klaus Schmidt on our registry, but perhaps your brother chose to be discreet. Perhaps a wife at home?" He laughed inappropriately. "Yes, Klaus is married. But he very fat. His wife no lie with him. Becker rolled his eyes at himself reflected in the booth. If Susan could hear me now, he thought. I fat and lonely too. I want lie with her. Pay lots of money. Becker was giving an impressive performance, but he'd gone too far. Prostitution was illegal in Spain, and Senor Roldan was a careful man. He'd been burned by Guardia officials posing as eager tourists. I won't lie with her. Roldan knew it was a setup. If he said yes, he would be heavily fined and, as always, forced to provide one of his most talented escorts to the police commissioner free of charge for an entire weekend. When Roldan spoke, his voice not quite as friendly. Sir, this is Escortas Belen. May I ask who's calling? Sigmund Schmidt, Becker invented weakly. Where did you get our number? La Guia Telefonica, Yellow Pages. Yes, sir, that's because we are an escort service. Yes, I want escort. Becker sensed something was wrong. Sir, Escortas Belen is a service providing escorts to businessmen for luncheons and dinners. This is why we are listed in the phone book. What we do is legal. What you are looking for is a prostitute. The words slid off his tongue like a vile disease. But my brother, sir, if your brother spent the day kissing a girl in the park, she was not one of ours. We have strict regulations about client escort contact. But you have us confused with someone else. We only have 2 redheads, Inmaculada and Rocio, and neither would allow a man to sleep with them for money. That is called prostitution, and it is illegal in Spain. Good night, sir. But, click. Becker swore under his breath and dropped the phone back into its cradle. Strike 3. He was certain Clouchard had said the German had hired the girl for the entire weekend. Becker stepped out of the phone booth at the intersection of Calle Salado and Avenida Asunción. Despite the traffic, the sweet scent of Seville oranges hung all around him. It was twilight, the most romantic hour. He thought of Susan. Strathmore's words invaded his mind. Find the ring. Becker flopped miserably on a bench and pondered his next move. What move? Chapter 25. Inside the Clínica de Salud Pública, visiting hours were over. The gymnasium lights had been turned out. Pierre Clouchard was fast asleep. He did not see the figure hunched over him. The needle of a stolen syringe glinted in the dark. Then it disappeared into the IV tube just above Clouchard's wrist. The hypodermic contained 30 cc of cleaning fluid stolen from a janitor's cart. With great force, a strong thumb rammed the plunger down and forced the bluish liquid into the old man's veins. Clouchard was awake only for a few seconds. He might have screamed in pain had a strong hand not been clamped across his mouth. He lay trapped on his cot, pinned beneath a seemingly immovable weight. He could feel the pocket of fire searing its way up his arm. There was an excruciating pain traveling through his armpit, his chest, and then, like a million shattering pieces of glass, it hit his brain. Clouchard saw a brilliant flash of light, and then nothing. The visitor released his grip and peered through the darkness at the name on the medical chart. Then he slipped silently out. On the street, the man in wire-rimmed glasses reached to a tiny device attached to his belt. The rectangular pack was about the size of a credit card. It was a prototype of the new Monaco computer. developed by the U.S. Navy to help technicians record battery voltages in cramped quarters on submarines. The miniature computer packed a cellular modem and the newest advances in microtechnology. Its visual monitor was a transparent liquid crystal display mounted in the left lens of a pair of eyeglasses. The monocle reflected a whole new age in personal computing. The user could now look through his data and still interact with the world around him. The monocle's real coup, though, was not its miniature display, but rather its data entry system. A user entered information via tiny contacts fixed to his fingertips. Touching the contacts together in sequence mimicked a shorthand similar to court stenography. The computer would then translate the shorthand into English. The killer pressed a tiny switch and his glasses flickered to life. His hands inconspicuously at his sides, he began touching different fingertips together in rapid succession. A message appeared before his eyes. Subject P. Clouchard, terminated. He smiled. Transmitting notification of kills was part of his assignment, but including victims' names, that, to the man in the wire-rimmed glasses, was elegance. His fingers flashed again, and his cellular modem activated. Message sent. Chapter 26. Sitting on the bench across from the public clinic, Becker wondered what he was supposed to do now. His calls to the escort agencies had turned up nothing. The commander, uneasy about communication over unsecured public phones, had asked David not to call again until he had the ring. Becker considered going to the local police for help. Maybe they had a record of a red-headed hooker, but Strathmore had given strict orders about that too. You are invisible. No one is to know this ring exists. Becker wondered if he was supposed to wander the drugged-out district of Triana in search of this mystery woman. Or maybe he was supposed to check all the restaurants for an obese German. Everything seemed like a waste of time. Strathmore's words kept coming back. It's a matter of national security. You must find that ring. A voice in the back of Becker's head told him he'd missed something crucial. But for the life of him, he couldn't think what it would be. I'm a teacher, not a damn secret agent. He was beginning to wonder why Strathmore hadn't sent a professional. Becker stood up and walked aimlessly down Calle Delicias, pondering his options. The cobblestone sidewalk blurred beneath his gaze. Night was falling fast. Dewdrop. There was something about that absurd name that nagged at the back of his mind. Dewdrop. The slick voice of Senor Roldan at Escortes Belen was on endless loop in his head. We only have two redheads. Immaculata and Rocio. Becker stopped short. He suddenly knew. And I call myself a language specialist. He couldn't believe he'd missed it. Rocio was one of the most popular girls' names in Spain. It carried all the right implications for a young Catholic girl. Purity, virginity, natural beauty. The connotations of purity all stemmed from the name's literal meaning, drop of dew. The old Canadian's voice rang in Becker's ears. Dewdrop. Rocio had translated her name to the only language she and her client had in common, English. Excited, Becker hurried off to find a phone. Across the street, a man in wire-rimmed glasses followed just out of sight. Chapter 27. On the crypto floor, the shadows were growing long and faint. Overhead, the automatic lighting gradually increased to compensate. Susan was still at her terminal, silently awaiting news from her tracer. It was taking longer than expected. Her mind had been wandering, missing David and willing Greg Hale to go home. Although Hale hadn't budged, thankfully he'd been silent, engrossed in whatever he was doing at his terminal. Susan couldn't care less what Hale was doing, as long as he didn't access the run monitor. He obviously hadn't. 16 hours would have brought an audible yelp of disbelief. Susan was sipping her third cup of tea when it finally happened. Her terminal beeped once. Her pulse quickened. A flashing envelope icon appeared on her monitor, announcing the arrival of email. Susan shot a quick glance toward Hale. He was absorbed in his work. She held her breath and double-clicked the envelope. North Dakota, she whispered to herself. Let's see who you are. When the email opened, it was a single line. Susan read it, and then she read it again. Dinner at Alfredo's, 8 p.m. Across the room, Hale muffled a chuckle. Susan checked the message header. From G. Hale at crypto.nsa.gov. Susan felt a surge of anger, but fought it off. She deleted the message. Very mature, Greg. They make a great carpaccio. Hale smiled. What do you say? Afterward, we could forget it. Snob, Hale sighed, and turned back to his terminal. That was strike 89 with Susan Fletcher. The brilliant female cryptographer was a constant frustration to him. Hale had often fantasized about having sex with her, pinning her against translators' curved hull, and taking her right there against the warm black tile. But Susan would have nothing to do with him. In Hale's mind, what made things worse was that she was in love with some university teacher who slaved for hours on end for peanuts. It would be a pity for Susan to dilute her superior gene pool, procreating with some geek, particularly when she could have Greg. We'd have perfect children, he thought. What are you working on? Hale asked, trying a different approach. Susan said nothing. Some team player you are. Sure I can't have a peek? Hale stood and started moving around the circle of terminals toward her. Susan sensed that Hale's curiosity had the potential to cause some serious problems today. She made a snap decision. It's a diagnostic, she offered, falling back on the commander's lie. Hale stopped in his tracks. Diagnostic? He sounded doubtful. You're spending Saturday running a diagnostic instead of playing with the prof? His name is David. Whatever. Susan glared at him. Haven't you got anything better to do? Are you trying to get rid of me? Hale pouted. Actually, yes. Gee, Sue, I'm hurt. Susan Fletcher's eyes narrowed. She hated being called Sue. She had nothing against the nickname, but Hale was the only one who'd ever used it. Why don't I help you? Hale offered. He was suddenly circling toward her again. I'm great with diagnostics. Besides, I'm dying to see what diagnostic could make the mighty Susan Fletcher come to work on a Saturday. Susan felt a surge of adrenaline. She glanced down at the tracer on her screen. She knew she couldn't let Hale see it. He'd have too many questions. I've got it covered, Greg, she said. But Hale kept coming. As he circled toward her terminal, Susan knew she had to act fast. Hale was only a few yards away when she made her move. She stood to meet his towering frame blocking his way. His cologne was overpowering. She looked him straight in the eye. I said no. Hale cocked his head, apparently intrigued by her odd display of secrecy. He playfully stepped closer. Greg Hale was not ready for what happened next. With unwavering cool, Susan pressed a single index finger against his rock-hard chest, stopping his forward motion. Hale halted and stepped back in shock. Apparently, Susan Fletcher was serious. She had never touched him before, ever. It wasn't quite what Hale had had in mind for their first contact, but it was a start. He gave her a long, puzzled look and slowly returned to his terminal. As he sat back down, one thing became perfectly clear. The lovely Susan Fletcher was working on something important, and it sure as hell wasn't any diagnostic. Chapter 28. Senor Roldan was sitting behind his desk at Escortes Belen, congratulating himself for deftly sidestepping the Guardia's newest pathetic attempt to trap him. Having an officer fake a German accent and request a girl for the night, it was entrapment. What would they think of next? The phone on his desk buzzed loudly. Senor Roldan scooped up the receiver with a confident flair. Buenas noches, Escortes Belen. Buenas noches, a man's voice said in lightning-fast Spanish. He sounded nasal, like he had a slight cold. Is this a hotel? No, sir. What number are you dialing? Senor Roldan was not going to fall for any more tricks this evening. 346210, the voice said. Roldan frowned. The voice sounded vaguely familiar. He tried to place the accent. Burgos, maybe? You've dialed the correct number, Roldan offered cautiously, but this is an escort service. There was a pause on the line. Oh, I see. I'm sorry, somebody wrote down this number. I thought it was a hotel. I'm visiting here from Burgos. My apologies for disturbing you. Espera, wait. Senor Roldan couldn't help himself. He was a salesman at heart. Was this a referral? A new client from up north? He wasn't going to let a little paranoia blow a potential sale. My friend, Roldan gushed into the phone. I thought I recognized a bit of a Burgos accent on you. I myself am from Valencia. What brings you to Seville? I sell jewelry, Majorica, pearls. Really, you must travel quite a bit. The voice coughed sickly. Well, yes, I do. In Seville on business, Roldan pressed. There was no way in hell this guy was Guardia. He was a customer with a capital C. Let me guess, a friend gave you our number. He told you to give us a call. Am I right? The voice was obviously embarrassed. Well, no, actually, it's nothing like that. Don't be shy, senor. We are an escort service. Nothing to be ashamed of. Lovely girls, dinner dates, that is all. Who gave you our number? Perhaps he's a regular. I can give you a special rate. The voice became flustered. Nobody actually gave me this number. I found it with a passport. I'm trying to find the owner. Roldan's heart sank. This man was not a customer after all. You found the number, you say? Yes, I found a man's passport in the park today. Your number was on a scrap of paper inside. I thought perhaps it was the man's hotel. I was hoping to return his passport to him. My mistake. I'll just drop it off at a police station on my way out of... Pardon, Roldan interrupted nervously. Might I suggest a better idea? Roldan prided himself on discretion and visits to the Guardia had a way of making his customers ex-customers. "Consider this," he offered. "Because the man with the passport had our number, he is most likely a client here. Perhaps I could save you a trip to the police." The voice hesitated. "I don't know. I should probably just..." "Do not be too hasty, my friend. I'm ashamed to admit that the police here in Seville are not always as efficient as the police up north. It could be days before this man's passport is returned to him. If you tell me his name, I could see that he gets his passport immediately." "Yes, well, I suppose there's no harm." Some paper rustled, and the voice returned. "It's a German name. I can't quite pronounce it. Gustafsson?" Rodan didn't recognize the name, but he had clients from all over the world. They never left their real names. "What does he look like in his photo? Perhaps I'll recognize him." "Well," the voice said, "his face is very, very fat." Roldan immediately knew. He remembered the obese face well. It was the man with Rocio. It was odd, he thought, to have two calls about the German in one night. "Mr. Gustafsson?" Roldan forced a chuckle. "Of course, I know him well. If you bring me his passport, I'll see he gets it." "I'm downtown without a car," the voice interrupted. "Maybe you could come to me." "Actually," Roldan hedged, "I can't leave the phone, but it's really not that far if you..." "I'm sorry, it's late to be out wandering about. There's a Guardia precinct nearby. I'll drop it there. And when you see Mr. Gustafsson, you can tell him where it is." "No, wait," Roldan cried. "The police really needn't be involved. You said you're downtown, right? Do you know the Alfonso 13 Hotel? It's one of the city's finest." "Yes," the voice said, "I know the Alfonso 13. It's nearby." "Wonderful. Mr. Gustafsson is a guest there tonight. He's probably there now." The voice hesitated. "I see. Well, then, I suppose it would be no trouble." "Superb. He's having dinner with one of our escorts in the hotel restaurant." Rodan knew they were probably in bed by now, but he needed to be careful not to offend the caller's refined sensibilities. "Just leave the passport with the concierge. His name is Manuel. Tell him I sent you. Ask him to give it to Rocio. Rocio is Mr. Gustafsson's date for the evening. She will see that the passport is returned. You might slip your name and address inside. Perhaps Mr. Gustafsson will send you a little thank you." "A fine idea. The Alfonso 13, very well. I'll take it over right now. Thank you for your help." David Becker hung up the phone. "Alfonso 13, he chuckled. "Just have to know how to ask." Moments later, a silent figure followed Becker up Calle Delicias into the softly settling Andalusian night.